great to be here. I'm gonna just yeah. So my name's John Haines. I'm an agroforestry advisor at the Soil Association. We're a charity based in Bristol, but working all over the UK. So my role, speak to farmers about trees, incorporating trees into farming for the benefit of of farms as well. So that's me. It's great to be here. Okay, the session plan. So it's really difficult putting together this presentation. I didn't know who was going to be in the room in terms of farming sectors and areas and things like that. So broad benefits of trees I try and touch on today. There's lots of sort of key examples that there's sort of anecdotal research and things like that really support where trees can be fantastic for farm businesses. I'm going to look at a quick case study and then and just explain sort of a mindset shift, rather than focusing on the case study as something to follow or copy. I guess today's talk is about how can we sort of change our minds on trees and their value in agricultural systems. I will then touch upon our agroforestry network sort of model that we're hoping to sort of roll out and launch. So we have a North and a South Wales network, so two separate networks, looking to bring farmers together and sort of farmer to farmer exchange through walks and things like that as well. And then also a very new one, and sort of an insight, Feeding Willow to Lambs network, and perhaps a few more useful resources. So I'll invite any questions and things like that at the end as well. So briefly, I did touch on it before, but Soil Association is a charity working with everyone, and it's something I like to sort of stipulate that obviously Soil Association is associated with organic certification. I work for the charity, so we're nothing to do with the certification company. It's a separate company. We work with organic licensees, but also licensees from other organic certification bodies, as well as conventional farmers. So our goal is to transform the way we eat, farm, and care for our natural world. Obviously, my role and the team that I sit in is very much focused on the way we farm. So within the farming and land use team, we have the Trees on Farm team, and currently that's 3 people. As I say, we support the inclusion of trees into farming systems for the benefit of the farm business and resilience. For farm business, resilience is a sort of key message that hopefully you'll take away from today. And we do this through obviously supporting farmers. I often get lots of questions and things like that, and it might be quite technical. It might be talking about marketing opportunities and things like that as well. But also we have a sort of suite of projects that we have often running in sort of collaboration with other partners around the UK. But just as a couple, we've been recently looking at a agroforestry carbon code. And whether we could present something, or whether we could present something that might allow farmers to be paid for the carbon that in-field trees presents. And then another one which is just about to start, so sort of looking at developing whole farm tree plans, to get that right. So you're considering the trees on all of your farms across the whole farm, rather than individual sections, maybe of woodland or hedgerows and things like that. So these are sort of, I guess, insights into how we try and support farmers. So as I said, sort of broad benefits of trees on farms. Benefits will be very sort of farm type specific, but also location specific. What works for you won't necessarily work for your neighbour, or the farm, the dairy farm down the road. there are a lot of potential opportunities of incorporating trees. Obviously, trees are in the landscape already, but I guess what I'm talking about is a mindset shift of including those within your farm business decisions. You should perhaps, definitely initially consider the woodlands, trees, hedges that you already have. That there is potential there to gain benefits from those. Don't forget to look forward. Trees and the benefits of trees very much could help your system. So if you're as an example, you're trying to move to sort of a rotational system, then potentially putting in hedges and things like that to make that easier as the business goes forward is definitely sort of the right mindset to get into. And then consider local collaborations. You'll be very good at farming, but perhaps you don't have the skills or time to undertake the tree work or the marketing of tree products, that sort of thing. So consider whether there are local markets that you might be able to talk to and get on board early on. As sort of any local expertise, obviously blessed there's quite a developed forestry sector in Wales and things like that. So there's lots of expertise there that could help. Not potentially focused on agroforestry, but there's lots of crossover. And then lastly, thinking the idea of sort of machinery cooperatives. Are there farmers in the area with similar trees, woodlands, things like that might be interested in sort of collaboration? So examples of opportunities for livestock farming, and I picked 3. This list, I think, if you haven't already guessed, I'm a big believer in trees in farms, but this list could be really long. And I've just a couple of questions. Could trees help maintain milk performance during periods of drought? We know that in severe heat, milk yields drop considerably, and there's very little you can do if your cows are out on pasture. Could opening up woodlands or allowing hedges to grow up give better shade and shelter for those cows? Similarly, could trees make outwintering of cattle possible? It's definitely very farm specific again, but if you opened up woodland, could that be a refuge for cows during really stormy weather and things like that? And would it allow your pasture? Would it relieve pressure on your pasture elsewhere? In those really wet times. And then the last one, and hopefully we'll talk about it because it's something we're trying to encourage. But could tree browse help finish lambs quicker? And there's been a few sort of initial studies looking at during the summer when cobalt levels within pasture drops right off because of drought usually. Finishing lambs, willow leaf specifically, gives them a really good boost of cobalt. So could that be something that you could incorporate into a farm plan going forward to support your business? And then just touching on the sort of arable and veg growing, there might be a few growers in the room. Could a tree-made microclimate help with crop production? So we know, a reduction in wind speed, shading potentially could be really beneficial to a crop. I know it sort of seems counterintuitive, but shading at certain times of the year is actually quite beneficial. Might tree rows allow you to get onto land earlier in the spring? Reducing sort of wet soil conditions and things like that. Is there soil benefits to be gained from incorporating trees? So could you increase soil organic matter through sort of leaf litter? Or there's recent research that's come out from Germany, basically looking at earthworm and micro life in the soil, and across an agroforestry sort of section and under the tree. Unsurprisingly, there's a lot more biology, and sort of further you get away from the tree row, that reduces. So if that's something your business is striving towards, the soil health and things like that, could agroforestry help you? And then lastly, and it's not something I really wanted to dwell on, but opportunities to diversify your income sources, with tree-based products. I think the reason not to dwell on it is there's loads of potential opportunities, even before you get into the idea of creating new markets, seeking sort of processing facilities and things like that you might need for certain elements, but definitely something not to be ignored. So that's why it's on the list. I guess the sort of the two ideas, could trees help reduce your farm input costs? That's probably a really good place to start. And then also diversify your income sources. So it's sort of, especially now, it's difficult. Everyone needs to consider what's happening, in the next 4, 5, 10 years. How can you structure your business to be resilient, basically, for what's coming? So then, I guess first of all, apologies that this family farm is up in Scotland. So as part of my job, I travel around the UK quite a lot. This is the barbers I visited a couple of months ago now, and it's a great business. But I guess what I want to talk about today and focus on is that mindset shift. And so it's an upland family farm producing store cattle and lamb outside Pitlochry in Scotland, which is about an hour and a half north of Perth. Fantastic place. I'd say he's a bit of a thought leader potentially in agroforestry, but meeting him, the mindset shift that I've talked about is happened. So they embrace trees on their farms through planting sort of wood pasture and shelter belts over the last 20 years. I think they inherited the farm with a few existing shelter belts, and sort of older generations that have farmed previously swore that allowing cattle and sheep into shelter belts, so they're specifically under the trees rather than shelter from the side like a hedge or a shelter, but actually letting them in was a lot better for the animals, and that's what they believe. So he sort of inherited that use of shelter belts and how that was, and he sort of, I don't know whether it's the case here, but the sort of connection between agriculture and forestry in certain parts of Scotland is a lot closer. Everyone talks about divide now. You have forestry in one hand and agriculture operating in the same landscape, by different people. I think up there it's potentially a little bit less obvious. Obviously, as time's gone on, that gap has grown a bit. So they planted some wood pasture and shelter belts, and you can't see, but here's the wood pasture. It's sort of 10, 15 years old, and it's not probably conventional of what he'd do today, but he used a sort of a forestry grant scheme, so there were stipulations, and the design sort of followed that. There's probably a lot more trees in there than you would potentially have nowadays, but he's using that to graze his sheep. So incorporating these trees into his farm allowed him to switch to a more productive sheep breed and lower his intensity. So obviously without reducing his profitability. And then especially now, and this is something I think he admits that perhaps wasn't through design necessarily, but the wood pasture helps with early spring grass growth. So it creates that microclimate that talked about. They struggle for that spring growth. That's often their sort of limiting factor. They lamb quite late and things like that. So these areas where there are trees, the microclimate means the grass starts growing earlier in the season. So these are sort of consequences of what's happened. But then since then, and sort of talk of a mindset shift of how he's now thinking of trees. I say here, it's the whole family. I do them disservice there. So they purchased a small sawmill and have now sort of cutting small timber for local markets and things like that. Something that I think they're quite passionate about as well. But it's all about unlocking value from trees that they've got on their farm. And then they've also now, which I think again we've seen another shift, is that they've started producing their own wood chip for overwinter bedding, and I think this has come about from just being so far north and often at the end of the queue in terms of straw. So when the season's bad, the straw is just not available to them, and it was a sort of real headache. So they started producing their own wood chip, and now they're very much saying that before they focused on the trees that could produce value through timber or things like that, but now every tree is important. So that they're coppicing hedges and things like that to produce wood chip because there's a value on their farm. And this is then composted down and spread back onto the land as sort of a nutritional source as well. And if you're interested, there's a lot more information available at the agroecology farmer profile on the family. Definitely worth having a look. So thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. This is obviously the case study. What can you do today? I guess I'm here to promote these Welsh agroforestry networks. So for the last 3 years, we've been running sort of a single Welsh agroforestry network. I'm not sure if anyone here has been in it. It's been funded by EU project. But we've decided to split them into two, so we're sort of trying to make it more regional and get farmers together. And so north and south, I wanted to try and confirm something for the event, but we haven't managed to do it. But basically, end of October, we're looking to host a farmer walk somewhere in North Wales to try and get farmers that are interested in trees on their farms together to talk, to learn, to exchange knowledge, exchange things like that. It's broadly a quarterly newsletter focused on the news relevant for an area, and then we will organise webinars and 2 tree-focused farm walks over the next year per network. So. And worth mentioning, we were funded through Green Match Fund Wales to these. And then the next one, and I talked about it in the sort of benefit stage. This is a Feeding Willow to Lambs network, and it's definitely a working title. But it's a network to facilitate farmer knowledge exchange on feeding willows to lambs. It's a UK-wide network, and I guess it started off, we're saying it's linked to an innovative farmers trial, which is trying to investigate lamb growth rates through supplementary willow feeding, and it's sort of built on previous research that I talked about before. I guess the innovative farmers trial is a trial designed by farmers. Farmers have come with that idea. And focusing on the sort of summer cobalt deficiency times. And then, again, because it's not geographical, because it's spread across the UK, I've been surprised how many people are feeding willow in various ways to sheep, goats, cattle as well. But there's been some fantastic stories and fantastic knowledge exchange already from this group. So it's quarterly webinar meetings, which is very much facilitated discussion sessions, so getting everyone's input and sharing pictures, sharing stories, things like that as well. So there's that option. And then briefly touch on it, we have this it's a bit of a maze, the website. But if you search Soil Association Agroforestry on your farm, you'll be brought through to the page which has lots of these resources on. So there's a free agroforestry handbook, definitely worth. It's sort of 3 or 4 years old now, but there's lots of the research that I've been sort of alluding to today is presented in sort of clear, a clear one handbook, so definitely worth looking at. And then also there's an online agroforestry training course, which again sort of outlines, hopefully guides you through the benefits that trees could present to you. So definitely look those out. as well as films, reports, webinars to watch back at. And then it's worth shouting out. So a couple of weeks ago, we had the first agroforestry show, which was based in Wiltshire. And have a look on the website if it's of interest. There's lots of sessions there around all sorts of different elements of agroforestry, and the audio from those sessions will be uploaded so people can learn and listen back. So then I've probably got a minute or two just to summarise. Potential benefits are very farm and location specific. Start with the existing trees, hedges, woodlands on your farm, and consider how they might help you achieve your sort of long-term farm business goals. Consider the opportunity trees provide for reducing farm input costs, and then consider joining an agroforestry network that we talked about to learn from other farmers. And then, learn from other farmers on how they're approaching trees on their farms. And then, when value is found for the trees in a farming system, 10%, I promise, will not be a daunting figure at all. So, thank you very much. Invite any questions. Let's go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that insight into agroforestry and integration of trees into the farm. I think from our perspective in Farmer Connect, it's very clear we want farmers to plant trees because they want to plant trees, and to meet that objective, it's about understanding what trees can actually do for the farm, their multifunctional abilities, and to meet and to mitigate climate change, provide shelter, alleviate diffuse pollution, etc. So there is a lot of good resource on the Farm Connect website with regards to trees and agroforestry, publications, podcasts, etc. We've also got a stand here today right at the other end of the building, so I'll be on the stand for most of the day if you want to come along and have a chat. You're very welcome to.